Well, hello friends and welcome to the beautiful, beautiful city of Oslo. We've been here for all of 2 hours now, and here's why we're here. E-Golf, Leaf, i3, Model 3 Leaf, E-Golf. Oslo, Norway in general, is the EV capital of the world. In January of 2022, 83.7% of new cars sold were pure electric vehicles. Another 7% were hybrids, which means less than 10% of new cars sold were purely petrol or diesel. We're here to figure out why Norway is so far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of EV uptake. What is this country doing so right? What can the rest of the world learn from what's being done here? And what do the 80s synth pop band a-ha have to do with it all? This is how Norway killed the petrol car. And this is Fully Charged.
It's time. Fully Charged Live Europe, the world's #1 electric vehicle and clean energy show, sponsored by Mobility Service, arrives at the Rai in Amsterdam on the 20th, 21st and 22nd of May. Get your tickets today.
To begin our trip, we thought it best to take a little tour around the city to see what mass EV uptake actually looks like in real life. And what better way to get around Oslo than in a Norwegian-made electric thing?
Don't get hit by a tram and don't get hit by a tram. Well, welcome to the pride of Norway. This is the Paxster. It's a last mile urban delivery vehicle designed and manufactured right here in Norway. There's about 3,000 of these things on the road globally. Most of them are here, where the Norwegian Postal Service relies heavily on them. But there's about 500 of them in New Zealand, and they're currently doing a trial in Britain with our very own Royal Mail. It's got about 60 miles of range, give or take, depending on which one you go for. And if you drive one of these around all day long, delivering post, the energy consumed will equate to roughly what a van would get from 0.7 litres of diesel. And it's got heated handlebars.
My tour guide for the day was Christina Boo. She's the Secretary General of Norway's EV Association, a tireless advocate for electric cars, and an absolute legend. And to kick things off, she took me to have a look at the car that started it all.
So Christina, what is this cute little thing?
This is a Buddy. I think Buddy and also the car Think both have a lot of the honor for the EV success that we now have in Norway, because they were both produced in Norway, manufactured in Norway, and part of the reason why the politicians started with incentives and tax exemptions.
So this was one of the first cars that you could buy, and then you got to drive in bus lanes, you didn't have to pay tolls on the roads.
Exactly, a lot of people bought this one and Think and drove in the bus lane into Oslo, and they didn't have to pay tolls and so on. So they were quite popular, and they're still around.
The speedometer goes up to 100 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
Optimistic, right? So I happen to know that you are a walking encyclopedia of Norwegian EV related facts and figures. Can you give me a few key stats and numbers that summarize the current landscape here?
Last year was another record year. 64.5% of all new car sales were full electric cars. This year is even better. So far this year it's 80% full electric. So we're getting very close to the goal, which is 100% market share from 2025, which is less than 3 years from now.
And that's obviously not including hybrids, which also make up, I think, 9 or 10%. So we're down to maybe 10% of new cars every month being just petrol, is that right?
That's true, but we're focusing on the zero emission cars here in Norway. That's the goal, the end goal, so that's why I'm talking about full electric ones.
Do you have any rough idea of when we may see a month where there's 0 pure ICE cars sold? Do you think we'll see that this year?
I think we're getting quite close, at least if you look at private purchases, because the market shares there are actually above 90% now. But well, we'll see. Maybe in one of the counties we will see it soon.
Next, we headed into the very centre of the city, where Christina said she had a surprise for me.
It's so peaceful here. It's hard to believe that we're in the centre of a big city.
Yeah, Do you want me to show you something, Jack?
Of course.
Should we go in here?
Nah.
Do you want to come?
Are you gonna...
I have a secret in here. Show you. Are you scared?
No, this looks like a normal place to take someone. This is an abandoned railway.
You know, it's a fortress up here.
We're gonna go visit some ghosts. There we go. Oh, is this a car park?
This is a car park reserved for electric cars.
Oh, it's huge.
It's big, and this is just the start of it.
Well, I think this is just about the most Norwegian thing I've seen all day so far. This is an EV-only parking garage, and every spot has its own charger.
Yeah, so this is reserved for full electric cars only, and it's very central, so a lot of people that drive into Oslo in the morning can park and charge here during the day and go back home after.
What we have here is a nice cross-section of the EVs in Oslo and what cars people drive. Notice there's a lot of old stuff on the road. You see a lot of Mitsubishi i-MiEVs and early Leafs. People really look after their EVs here and keep them running a long time.
And Nissan Leaf started selling, people started buying them very early, so there's actually, I think, 75,000 Nissan Leafs in Norway or so. So it's a lot of it's probably the most common car you can see.
Charging infrastructure, obviously a huge part of reassuring people to go electric. If there's not enough chargers, people are not going to buy electric cars. It feels like in the UK, it's always just a bit behind the number of EVs. The charge is never quite enough. Do you feel that Norway's done a better job of keeping it level?
Well, we definitely started with the cars. The chargers was for many years lagging behind, but today it's a whole lot better. Normal chargers like this, it's supported here in Oslo for example, apartment buildings get some support to put them up. There's not that much need for sort of public normal chargers like this as people charge at home mostly. So the big focus now is on fast charging, obviously.
Now, Christina said something very, very important just then about home charging, and if you weren't paying close attention, you may just have missed it. So here's an idiot on a rooftop to explain.
Now, Oslo's public charging network is very, very good. In fact, over the last 10 years, as the number of EVs on the road has been skyrocketing, the number of EVs per fast charger has been steadily going down. Proof that the city is building these chargers preemptively instead of reactively, as most cities should, as very few cities are. And that's very good, but of course, as we know, the most important charger is the one you have at home. That's where you want to be doing 95% of your charging if you are lucky enough to have your own driveway or parking spots. And that's potentially tricky in Oslo because many, many people in this city live in high-rise apartment buildings with private underground car parks. And as just about anyone who's ever rented can tell you, landlords not super well known for going above and beyond the absolute bare minimum required from them. I know people in London who have had landlords flat out refuse to let them fit chargers to their rented properties, even when they offered to cover the cost themselves. Happily, Oslo has a couple of policies in place designed to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen. The first is called the Charging Ready Requirement, and it relates to any newly built car park, be it public or private. And it states that while you don't necessarily have to build all the chargers from the get-go, you must at the very least build the guideways and space required for EV infrastructure so that residents can easily retrofit chargers if they want them. This ties in nicely with the second policy, which is called the Right to Charge Law, which states that no resident can be denied the right to plug in their car or fit a charger if they want one. Nice. Oh, it's horrible.
Right, that was a lot of serious, sensible infrastructure chat just then, so let's have some light relief now. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, for the scarcely believable, yet absolutely true, AHA story.
In 1990, the lead singer of Norwegian synth pop sensation AHA, a chap by the name of Morten Harket, jumped into his EV-converted Fiat Panda with a couple of his bandmates and set off on a road trip around Norway. The trip was a protest of Norway's existing EV policy, which he felt did nothing to incentivize driving a zero-emission vehicle. During their trip, they willfully refused to pay Norway's infamously expensive road tolls because they felt that electric vehicles should be exempt. They parked illegally wherever they could because they felt electric vehicles should park for free. And they ignored every single fine that came their way. After a while, the authorities caught up with them and confiscated the Panda and put it up for auction to pay off the fines. The thing is, no one really wanted to buy a crusty DIY converted Fiat Panda, so only one person showed up to the auction. Morten Harket. He bought the Panda back and the road trip resumed. And depending on who tells this story, that happened multiple times. They kept on taking his car away, he just bought it back and carried on. Eventually the authorities clocked on that he was taking the piss and didn't put the car up for auction. The road trip was over, but not before Morten's campaign had attracted national attention. Later that year, Norway became the first country anywhere in the world to offer zero purchase tax on electric vehicles, and many more incentives followed shortly after. Free parking in various car parks, no road tolls. Now, many of these incentives have been rolled back slightly in subsequent years. EVs do now pay road tolls, but only up to 50%, and here in Oslo, it's even less than that. But they're all still in place, and it all started with that bloke from Aha. Aha! Silly old job, this.
Up next, it was time for a visit to City Hall for a chat about the government and their role in Norway's incredible EV uptake. But first, we popped our heads into Neo House, which is directly across the road from City Hall. Neo is part of a new wave of very impressive Chinese EV brands looking to capitalise on our Western OEMs' sluggishness in transitioning to electric and take over the European market. And unsurprisingly, they've all opted to start their European campaigns here, in Lekki-loving Norway. Another perk of being Europe's leaders in electrification, you get to play with the cool new toys before everyone else.
I like your parliament.
Yeah, this is our parliament. This is where the politicians decide everything.
So, in a nutshell, how much of the credit do those guys get for the uptake of EVs in the city? Or is it just that everyone in Norway decided of their own to buy one?
Well, of course, it's the politicians should get a lot of the credit. It's been a lot of pressure groups, we are one of them, that have been pushing for strong policies. But in the end, it's the politicians that have decided to have strong EV policies for many years. Unlike a lot of other countries that have had it for a short period of time, maybe. Norway has kept them since early 1990s, where they started with tax exemptions. And not just tax exemptions, but also putting higher taxes on polluting cars.
So it's not just about giving a nice big discount to people that want to buy electric cars. It's not really a discount at all, is it? It's a tax break. Simultaneously, that tax is being ramped up for ICE cars, just making them so expensive that it doesn't make sense to buy.
Yeah, so the very high purchase taxes on a new car in Norway, and if it depends on the weight and the emissions of the car, how high the tax is. But a fully electric car are exempt the VAT purchase tax and as well the VAT, which is 25% in Norway. In addition to this, it's a lot of local incentives as well. Initially, there were free public parking. Passing the tolls was free. We have lots of toll roads in Norway, coming into Oslo, for example, but also on main highways, and access to ferries for free and so on. Today it's more of a rebate, so parking publicly or passing a toll is cheaper for a full electric car than other cars.
Of course, it's not just the cars that have gone electric in Oslo. The ferries are electric now too. The little speedboats that you can rent to drive around the fjords are electric. And the city is strewn with rentable electric scooters and bicycles, because it's not just about convincing everyone to buy electric cars. It's about convincing people not to use their cars wherever possible. To that end, a couple of years ago, Oslo removed almost all the parking spaces from the centre of town and closed a load of roads off to cars in an effort to make the city centre more peaceful and friendlier to pedestrians and cyclists. Woohoo!
But wait, there's more, because it isn't just modes of transport going green in Oslo.
This is perhaps the most powerful demonstration of how deeply committed to clean energy the city of Oslo is. This is a zero-emission building site. All of the machinery is electric and the methods of construction have been rethought in order to use less energy. For example, instead of digging a big long hole when fitting a new water pipe, they dig a little small hole and push the pipe through using a special machine. Big piles of soil like these ones just behind the camera, which normally would be thrown out and then new earth brought in, that's all going to get reused. And what are they building here? They're building a nice big green sculpture park. There's a stream just up the hill somewhere over there, which is a bit dammed up and clogged and dirty at the moment. It's being cleaned and that water is going to run through the park. There are multiple sites like this across Oslo right now. Here's my favourite fact. Just next door is a nursery. Most building sites in Oslo have to stop between 11 and 1 every day because that's nap time in nursery schools. This one doesn't, because it's quiet.
Our time in Oslo was running out, so it was time for one final chat with my new BFF Christina about the future and that.
So tell me, Christina, Oslo, Norway in general, so far ahead of the rest of the world, but still plenty of work to do. What do you see as the big remaining obstacles? What still needs to change in order to achieve carbon neutrality in the city?
Well, we do have the cars. The incentives are, I think they will be in place long enough for this to happen. The politicians are eager to make this happen. People are ready. They're buying EVs. So the only challenge that's left is charging stations and getting enough of chargers up, both where people live, but also fast chargers, so that people that go on longer trips have easy access to charging on the way. Sometimes I wonder why other countries are so slow, because the technology is here. We have the technology. It's still a bit more expensive, so that's why we need politicians to make it competitive. That's not that difficult. When we think about how quickly we need to reduce CO2 emissions, I can't believe other countries don't adopt what Norway is doing or do something similar faster. We should really stop selling cars that cannot run on renewable fuels.
You hear that, Boris? So, what do we conclude from all this? How has Norway been so successful in killing off sales of new petrol cars, and what can the rest of the world learn? Well, for me, it's all thanks to that bloke from Aha. No, not really. Although, the fact that he was protesting lack of EV incentives in the 90s, the fact that the first EV incentives came in the 90s, at least suggests that the average Norwegian person was paying attention to zero-emission vehicles much sooner than the rest of us. Maybe it's something to do with being surrounded by all this beautiful, untouched nature. Maybe it's something to do with Scandinavian collectivism that means that the average Norwegian person is a bit more alert to climate change than the average Brit, for example. Maybe. But there is a simpler and much more obvious reason why so many people are buying new electric cars here. It's because the government has made doing so the obvious choice. They've put chargers absolutely everywhere. They've ensured that even if you live in a tower block, you can still get a charge. And above all else, they have made buying a new electric car so much more financially viable than buying an equivalent petrol model that unless you're filthy rich, you barely have a choice. And here's the thing, no one is complaining, because once you buy an EV, you realize that EVs are fantastic. And once lots of people buy EVs, you realize that all of a sudden your city feels cleaner, quieter, more peaceful. It's all about the policymakers. Only they can ensure we have enough chargers and that buying an EV is even a realistic option for most people. And in most parts of the world, nowhere near enough is being done. In the UK, so far this year, 17% of new cars sold are BEVs, 17%. And yet we're already rolling back our EV incentives like it's job done. Here at Fully Charged, we've spent a lot of time, myself included, bashing car brands for not doing their bit, for building too many expensive, over-the-top EVs and not enough small, cheap, simple ones. And that's true. But actually, Norway is proof that even with that being the case, mass EV adoption is achievable right now with proper legislation. Not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but today. So if you're watching this and you're wondering, what can I do to help accelerate the energy transition where I live? Write to your local politician, tell them to pull their finger out and vote for the party that are promising to make the right changes. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have been, thank you for watching.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I think you would also enjoy this. Very relevant to the topic. Here is our latest video. Up there you can subscribe to Fully Charged at no cost or commitment from you, and here is our Patreon link. Have a look, see what you think.